they die happy. Okay, so when scientists started studying them, they couldn't figure out how this happened. Well, they kind of had an idea how it happened. That there was some plant somewhere that was the ancestor to all these plants. If you had to guess where that plant was, where would you suppose you'd find the ancestor to these plants? Okay. Australia and Polynesia are good guesses. In this case, it's California. Okay, and what they found was that there are groups of plants, and somebody said this earlier, that they're related to sunflowers, and that's true, but they're not too closely related to sunflowers. But there's a plant there that spreads its seeds, while the seeds stick into birds. So one of the first birds that showed up on Hawaii, one of the first seabirds probably that showed up on Hawaii, had these seeds to the ancestors of these plants. The seeds are dropped or excreted, depending on how they were transported, and they start growing. Well, they're among the first plants that show up here. They have no competitors, and so you get what's called adaptive radiation, where they evolve in all these different directions so that you get 40 or 50 or 100 different plants. Well, the silver swords are an excellent example of adaptive radiation. We've seen some other examples. The apapene, the bird we saw the other day at Volcano, the red bird, that's a honey creeper, and there were, before people showed up here, there were about 50 species of Hawaiian honey creepers. Now there are about 6 or something like that. The Drosophila, the fruit flies. Some of you guys heard me get all excited about the fruit flies at the botanical garden. There are 600 species of Drosophila on the Hawaiian Islands, and scientists using DNA techniques have figured out which one is the ancestral species, and they've been able to trace the movement back and forth. So, island biogeography, it's a really neat thing. You get all this adaptive radiation. Then the other part of the story of Hawaiian biology is the introduced exotics. And if you notice where the silver swords are, the lady said don't touch them because they'll die. Well, and then somebody else pointed out that the problem is not humans so much as pigs. And notice we're inside an enclosure. Well, you know, there were no pigs on the Hawaiian Islands until those first Polynesian folks showed up. And they turned pigs loose. Pigs will eat anything. They'll eat any kind of plant. You guys know back home we have a problem with feral hogs all over Arkansas, and you're allowed to shoot them on sight because they destroy habitats, they destroy ecosystems. So when people showed up here, they brought pigs, they brought rats, they brought dogs and cats, and they brought cows. And all of those things are bad for the native species. And so many of the species, remember I said there were 50 or 60 species of honey creepers, all but say 10 or 15 of them are gone, and most of those are in big trouble. I think the apapene is the only honey creeper that exists still in numbers. Anytime you introduce exotic animals into a habitat where they don't belong, or exotic plants, bad things happen. And here it's hogs, rats, cats, and dogs, and now of course mongooses. When they brought mongooses, I believe in the 1890s, turned them loose. We've been talking about nenes. You guys say I have a nene fixation. How can I be fixated on something that clearly doesn't exist? There were nenes only on the Big Island. They were only on the Big Island. But there was also another goose, a giant goose that lived on the Big Island. Both of these were descendants from Canada geese, just like the ones we have back home. They show up on the island, they start their adaptive radiation, and then, the Polynesians showed up. And when they did, the giant goose went extinct, quickly went extinct. The giant geese, they're not sure whether they could fly or not. They were that big. They were right on the edge of being able to fly. But seriously, when they would stand upright, they were nearly 2 meters tall. That, my friends, is a hell of a goose, okay? But they're all gone. The nenes, by the mid-1950s, they were down to 20 nenes. And they caught them all, started a captive breeding program. Anybody here ever raise geese? Anybody ever try to raise geese? They're so easy to raise. Captive breeding was very successful. They took all the nenes back, they put them on every one of the Hawaiian Islands and turned them loose, and immediately they were eaten by mongooses, or the eggs were eaten by mongooses. And so all these populations, the population here on the Big Island, it's not a self-sustaining population. They have to raise nenes in captivity and turn them loose because they're ground nesters, and the mongooses eat them up. There's one island, and I can't remember which one it is, where there are no mongooses, and that island has a self-sustaining population of nenes. Anyway, the silver sword is the perfect example of adaptive radiation and also what happens because because of exotic species, because if it weren't for that fence right there, this would be pig food. Or cow food. I guess you guys saw the sign with the invisible cows. This concludes our biology moment.
So,